Chainsaw Diaries is coming to you from Immortals Inc. Studios. Hey, this is TCDMatt. We're going for a deeper cut today with one of our chain sorters here from Cleveland 40K, Neo Wah, representing the Wah as greatly as he can. We've got John Dusenberry, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the Michigan GT and the overall tournament scene in 8th, and see how things are breaking down and what you think of it. So, John, welcome to the show. Thanks for your time today, man.
Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
So, tell us a little bit about your background in 40K and where you started out and how that's going.
So about 6 or 7 years ago, probably even longer, I don't know. It was right around 5th edition time. A friend of mine named Ryan Dirty Johnson, he goes by Dirty. He's the guy I travel with a lot, to be honest with you. Back and forth to these different tournaments and events. He and I were gaming. We were playing Dungeons and Dragons at the time, and he introduced me and a couple of the other guys he knows to a game called Warhammer 40K. He said, you should come check it out. So I said, all right. So we went up to a gaming store that's a little bit further west of here at the time, and on that first night, I was pretty hooked instantly. Actually, that first night I met another good friend of mine, my other traveling buddy, a guy by the name of Jackie Jones. We started both that night. We both got invited. We both started that night. So we've been 40K buddies ever since, and good friends. And at the time, I was looking through different books. There was 2 different books I was looking at. I was looking at Orcs, and then I was also looking at Space Wolves. And it was suggested to me that I go with the Space Wolves just because it was going to be a little bit more forgiving to a newer player. So I started playing Space Wolves at first, and I did that for a few years. Played a very Imperial style of army, and again, they're very forgiving in a lot of ways when you're playing.
Yeah, 5th edition Longfang spam was a real thing for Space Wolves.
Yeah, and Rune Priest spam. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, Rune Priest spam. Yeah,
yeah, because at the time, not everybody could take a bunch of HQs.
That's
but,
right.
In 5th edition, actually, you could take 2 HQ slots for a single HQ slot, and they were, I think, 50 points apiece, or 70,
somewhere around there.
75 points apiece when you went to level 2. So guys were taking like 8 Rune Priests.
Yep.
And a 2,000 point army, and they were using Jaws to just terrify people. It was great.
The scourge of the Tyranids everywhere. Jaws of the World Wolf. For new players, it was just devastating. You had to make an initiative check, which isn't around anymore.
Right.
But you had to make an initiative check, or you were just taken off the table.
And the worst part is that you did it along the edge of a measuring tape, and it was 24 inches wide. So what you would do is you would deep strike a Rune Priest in Terminator armor, send him up, go right down the thing, and then and you'd make that line. And Tyranids, Tau too. Tau hated it. It was awful because they were so slow. So you would just and of course you would spam 8 of them.
Yep.
But when I first started playing, I was more into like the fluff of it, really.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't get into the tournament scene until a few years later. And actually, the first tournament I went to was at a place in Pittsburgh called Legion Games.
Okay.
And I took last place at my first tournament. It was pretty.
Me too.
It was actually kind of fun. I enjoyed myself a lot that day. In fact, now that you're speaking about Tyranids, that was the first army I ever played in a tournament. It was a Tyranid army, and I'd taken Space Wolves with me. But I was really big into running a Space Wolf blob at the time.
Okay.
I don't remember if you remember the Logan, Arjac,
Yep.
Wolfguard blob that was out there.
Absolutely.
And it was really cool. And I loved Arjac Rockfist. I thought he was the greatest thing. So I took Arjac and I took Logan. I got destroyed that entire tournament. I wasn't into the meta. I wasn't into playing the meta. But I went with some friends, and my friends, including Ryan and including Jackie, there's about 10 to 12 of us went to that tournament. We ended up scoring really hot at that tournament. It was a lot of fun. One of my buddies took took best general that year.
Outstanding.
Yeah, at that tournament. And then Jackie, if you've seen his work,
We have.
he is he's literally the best painter in Cleveland.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to say that, but the man has the medals to prove it. You know?
And I think it goes a little bit farther than Cleveland, actually. Jackie's one of the best painters in 40K. He does some phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, he just won Michigan GT for the third time in a
Drill
row.
Master, yeah.
Yeah, third time in a row for painting and theme. And his pirate-themed Dark Eldar are amazing. I mean, the stuff... He spends months on this. So, yeah, he's got some really good stuff. And we had a great time when we were there. And I was hooked instantly on that. And the funny thing is the great part about it is the kind of friendships, and then also as you go more and more to these tournaments, you start to see and know people that you know more.
Yep, absolutely.
You get to know some of the top tier competitors, and the thing about 40K is a longtime player. I'm sure you realize this. It takes time to really become a good player.
Absolutely, it's definitely an acquired skill, and further than that. Tournament 40K is an even further acquired skill because you're going against that top tier player, and it doesn't take just thinking about how to win with your army. It's really knowing what everybody's army can do.
Yeah, well, and like Jackie, I was saying, he actually, the first guy he played ended up being best journal at the tournament. It was Tony Grappando, who...
Grappando's a fantastic player.
Yeah, took second at Adepticon. He's on Team USA. He's got a really good player. That was Jackie's first opponent, and Jackie got smashed. And he said, that was the only game of the tournament he felt like he was out of it. And he did really well. He ended up finishing pretty well. But a lot of these guys are really setting the meta for the new game, and so you really have to. And in the tournament play, you really have to be aware of what the meta is and what you can do. There are a lot of other players like the Sean Nadins out there who are very good at being foils for whatever the current meta is. They'll come out with whatever. He won LVO a couple years ago with Tyranids because he brought the list that hurt all of the Eldar players that were out there, so it was great.
And you run into players like that. Alex Fennell's another big counter player out there who, for those of you who are into the heavy tournament scene. But Michigan GT had actually some pretty decent heavyweights there. They had Aaron Along, I saw, and Pajama Pants was there. Baramovich.
What was funny? So funny story about the really good players being there. One of the really good players is a guy by the name of Brad Chester. I don't know if you great guy.
Out of Toledo.
Yeah, out of Toledo. Yeah, he's a Toledo guy, Ohio guy. Awesome. I've seen him at probably half a dozen tournaments. Well, so my game one, I'm playing a guy who's playing Harlequins. So it was an interesting matchup. I ended up pulling it out at 130-20 in my first game. But I'm sitting right next to Brad Chester. He's sitting at the table next to me, and he's playing this guy. And he beat the crap out of this dude. And I'm just sitting there, and the guy is just like, oh. The entire time, Brad, by the way, is a really nice guy. So when he even beats you, he's very nice about who he is. He's a very good sportsman. I don't want to badmouth him in any way, shape, or form. But he had walked away, and he was doing something, and the guy was like, man, I just can't believe I just... he beat the crap out of me. And I'm like, yeah, I know. He's like, well, and I looked at him. I said, well, that's what happens when you play one of the top five players in the country.
Absolutely.
you get your crap kicked in.
Yeah, and it's really eye opening because you go from a small, go from being that big fish in a small pond. We're all used to playing in our local stores.
Yeah.
Maybe you've won a couple local tourneys, and you think, what the heck? Let me try out a GT.
Sure.
Then you run out, and coming through 6th and 7th edition, you run into those Death Stars. And you end up shooting with a full 1,850 point army and doing no wounds in a round. And you get those kind of people who are just there to play the game to the utmost of their ability and really analyzing the rules to the absolute T. And taking advantage of, in a good way, not abusing the rules, but taking advantage of every possible ability. So, with that in mind, you brought a really interesting list to the Michigan GT. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So yeah, my list. A couple years ago, I decided to exclusively be an orc player. I say that.
God bless you for that.
Yeah, right. My idea of the game is I've had some local players give me a hard time over this, but I like to play the game. I like to say it on hard mode. And my reason for that is, one, I love orcs. I love the orc fluff. I think they're great. I think it's awesome that they're like the monsters of the. And they're really realistically, when you're fighting orcs, the realization is that you are eventually going to lose against orcs because you're never going to be able to get rid of all of them.
That's right.
Eventually, orcs and Tyranids will be the only two races in the universe, and they will end up fighting one another. And that's just the way that it's going to end up being. But one of the things I love about playing orcs is when you play as an orc player, two things happen. First of all, nobody's mad that they're playing orcs.
That's right.
Nobody's ever mad that they're playing an orc player. They are mad sometimes when they lose against orc players because you can't stop them with the invulnerable save. Your regular armor save has no good.
Yep.
Feel no pain is literally the only thing that you can do with it. So it's difficult for a lot of players, so it's difficult to deal with.
To be able to mitigate that, yeah.
Yeah. And Weird Boys do it especially well because you take them for 62 points, right?
Yep.
And you take a Supreme Command detachment, which is what I did, and I took 5 Weird Boys with it. But then what you do is I also used a basic battalion detachment, and that battalion detachment, what I did was I took another Weird Boys to give me 6, and then I took Snickrot as well.
Gotta love Snickrot.
He actually scored me a few points just by showing up on turn 3 and sitting on an objective, which was nice. Then you take 30 boys. A unit of 30 boys, and then I took 3 units of grots, different sizes. One was 21, one was 20, and one was 15. And the reason I did that is I also took 4 pain boys. And the reason I did all that is give me a nice even number of 90, and I created a weird boy blob. Now I'm an orc player, so I'm used to using blob, and now with the new rules where you can't single out characters unless you have the assassin or sniper special rule. One of the things that I was able to do was for every 10 models around a weird boy, you get +1 to the psychic phase. And the reason why you want to do that is if you go to 11 or 12, you're actually doing D6 mortal wounds instead of D3 mortal wounds with a smite. And what that does for you is that allows you to be doing anywhere from 6 to 36 mortal wounds per round. Now, the disadvantage is once you roll 12 or better, you're going to have to take a Perils of the Warp test, which means you're going to do D3 mortal wounds to yourself because they've simplified Perils of the Warp from 7th edition.
Yep.
So you're going to take D3 mortal wounds. But you also mitigate that by having a Pain Boy within so many inches and having 4 of them. What I was doing was I was mitigating and then healing the next turn in the movement phase because you're able to do that as well. And you just use those guys as a way to buff yourself from the attacks. The other thing that you do is, or that I did, is I took a Supreme Command detachment, or Spearhead detachment, and I took a Big Mech. And what the Big Mech does is you put him right in the center of that blob, and he gives everybody in the blob a 5+8 invulnerable save from shooting, which so many armies nowadays want to do shooting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I took 2 big tracks with me. Big tracks come from Forge World, and the great thing about big tracks is that you can put what's called a Super Scorcher on them.
Yep.
And a Super Scorcher, what it does is gives you a 24-inch range, and it's a flamer. So you have 24-inch flamers, and you're on a tank, so you're able to move 14 inches. So you have a 38-inch range.
Threat range, yeah.
Yeah, your threat range is huge now. And the Super Scorcher, the strength of them is straight 6, AP -2, 1 damage. And you're doing on average about 7 of those wounds a turn, but you can do up to 12. It's pretty crazy. And it's got a lot of wounds on the tank itself. And if you do it the right way, you have another custom force field around them, you give them a 5+ invulnerable save. So they get pretty deadly pretty quickly, especially against Harlequin armies.
I would say that. So, and on top of that, it really fills in, my style of list building is I like to make sure that I'm taking advantage of one section of the game and really kind of isolating that. You're doing that with the psychic phase and running kind of 6 mini Magnuses with the blobs around them and that +2, which is fantastic. And then you're mitigating some of your weaknesses by bringing those tracks along, which give you 2 of the things that orcs really suffer from in blob armies, which is mobility and shooting.
Yeah.
That's really creative and really fantastic. That's well done on that list build, man.
Yep, and that's not even all the points I got. So the other two things that I took was also from Forge World. There's two Mecha Dreads, and what the Mecha Dreads do is they're fun because they have a 3-up armor save, which is great. You could put a custom force field on them if you want to, or you can put a Mega Charger on them. What a Mega Charger does is one turn, it's free. For one turn, you can roll a d6, and if you roll anything above a 1, 2 through 6, you get an additional 8 inches of movement. So you go 16 inches in one turn.
Wow.
They also have a gun. It's okay. You get 2d6 shots, strength 5, AP 0. But in close combat, they have a Ripaclaw, and the Ripaclaw has 5 attacks. It goes at strength 12 if you're at full.
Ooh.
And then it does -2 to your armor, and then does d6 wounds.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's killer.
So, and then to even go further, they have a fun little rule that allows them to, beyond the 3+, they have essentially a 4+ type of disappearing feel no pain. So if you shoot against them and you try to injure them, when they go to do their wound rolls, they roll a 4+. If they roll they avoid the wound, it stays at 4+. If they don't avoid it, goes down to a 5+, and then the third time 6+, and the fourth time they lose it. So they have kind of like, and you can do that even against mortal wounds. So they have this. It's kind of a fast-moving Death Dread with a lot of cool stuff to it.
Yeah, that's a really good job of mitigating and giving you some threat responses. And yeah, I like that army a lot. I may have to dip my toe into the Orky Forge World arena to supplant some of the stuff for my greenskins to bring that to the table. So you've talked about going up in the tournaments with a bunch of friends. I find that to be a really great experience to see those that kind of team experience that you're bringing to the table, because
Sure.
Not only a lot of tournament players that are playing for the first time, you'll hear tournament players talk about hitting the wall in between day 1 and day 2.
Sure.
And what I've found that when you have team players, it really helps you fight through that wall, because you're going out afterwards. You're able to kind of recharge and talk about what may not have worked for you. Is that your experience as well?
So the first thing I would suggest is, as a tournament player, you do a little bit of talking, but also at the end of day 1, you've just been through 3 games. I mean, you've been through somewhere between 9 and 10 hours worth of gaming, right? So
Yeah.
that's like hitting the wall is what you're talking about. So the best thing to do is first be out of town when you're doing this, right? If you're going to do a two-day event, the second thing is go with friends, because like you were saying, because they're going to help you get rid of that kind of, that ego that happens every once in a while.
Oh yes.
So there can be a huge ego to some things, and it will help you to stay humble.
Yeah.
The next day when you're going in to play the game, and really that's a big part of it. The truth is, a lot of the best players out there in the country, if you watch them, there isn't a lot of ego to what they're doing. They're really there to play the game, and while they're playing the game, you can tell that that's what they're doing. There isn't like this ego. They're there to play. That's what they're there for. They're not there to fool around, and they keep each other humble that way. And I think a lot of the best players out there do that. And I think there are players out there that just kind of take themselves way too seriously.
Absolutely.
And just have fun and enjoy yourself. It doesn't matter where you place in the tournament, just as long as you're having fun and you're enjoying the game in the area. Getting out there in the tournament scene too is also important, because it breaks you out of your local meta.
Yeah, which is huge.
Right. You get these guys that that they have their we do this. My group of friends, when we play, is we'll have armies that we like to play, and we kind of react, and we start getting into, and you do this naturally. It's not something that you do. It's not like I'm here to beat my friends all the time. It's just something that you react to, and you learn to play to a certain way, and then you get out to one of these grand tournaments, and there's like this whole other way of playing the game, which is great.
Yeah, It's my first tournament experience was very similar to yours. I've talked a little bit about it. My first major tournament was I played in BAO in 2015,
Nice.
and yeah, I got my backside handed to me over and over again. And very much like you, I went in trying to play something a little different. I brought a Slaneshi army,
yeah.
and
Cool now, though.
yeah, absolutely. Noise Marines are fantastic. I love them.
So, funny story. My buddy Ryan had planned on taking his Dark Elder, didn't finish it. So at the last minute, he took Slanesh Noise Marines.
Yeah, that is a legit list. And if it ever comes around, GW, I'm sure you're listening because we've obviously made it to the big time at Chainsword Diaries. If you're ever listening and you decide in your good graces to give us a book and we get full on Death Guard, Thousand Suns treatment, the basics that are already there are so good. And again, dipping your toe into the Forge world to get Sonic Dreadnoughts, the ability to take Twin Blastmasters on a Hellbrute body, it doesn't suck. I'll tell you that.
Well, I'll tell you what. Day one I did really well. I went 2-0-1 on day one. Day two, I ran into something that was just awful, and it was something it's something that is from Forge World. It's 300 points.
I think I know where you're going.
It's the Charybdis Assault Dreadclaw. That thing, if you ever play in a game, just be aware of it. And the guy I played was the nicest guy in the world. And to be honest with you, 90% of the players you'll see on the tournament team
Absolutely
are really cool
Absolutely.
people. But man, that thing, it destroyed a good portion of my armor. Now, to be fair, by the end of the game, I could have still been in it, but I actually shook his hand and said, "Hey, man, you earned the 50 points," and I conceded to him. Because he did. He really did. And I think that it was important that I did that for him. And then I ended up playing a guard army, and that was a really fun game, too. Game 5. I ended up losing that one. It was a nail-biter. Yeah, it's that... If
Dreadclaw's no joke.
Corn Berserkers. And what's great, too, is he brought a Demon Prince.
Mm-hmm.
And his only purpose for the Demon Prince was to deep strike the Demon Prince, right?
Yep.
Takes I think it's called Warp... I can't remember, Warp Field or something like that.
Yeah.
It's make sure... Or Warp Speed. Make sure guys...
Oh, yeah. Move them double speed up.
Yeah, in the shooting phase. So you got the... Corn Berserkers come out of the Dreadclaw. You put the Demon Prince right next to the Dreadclaw, cast onto the Corn Berserkers, and then the Corn Berserkers move in the shooting phase, and then they just wreck you in the assault phase. I was able to stop his psychic power because I have 6 psychers.
Yep.
I was able to stop it, but then that guy still made a freaking 9-inch charge. It's amazing, that he was rolling really well. He even said it to me. He's like, "I'm rolling really well, and you were rolling really crappy." And I'm like, "Yeah, well,
it happens."
Yeah, it's one of those things in the game. You try to mitigate as much of the variance as possible. That's why things like Dark Angel Ravenwing were so popular, like 7th edition.
Absolutely, yeah.
And invisibility.
Yeah, invisibility, and taking the chance out of a game is definitely something that you want to do in tournaments. That's why you'll hear a lot of tournament players complain about anything that they feel is RNG or whatever the case, even though it may be something that's fun. Sure. As orc players, we love our guns that have random strength and random power. And,
sure, yeah, absolutely.
But it's not necessarily something that we're going to bring to a tournament all the time, just because we want to be able to slow the game down and limit the opportunities where things aren't going to go your way with the dice.
Sure. And the other thing is what's great about Michigan too is that I really like that they do is they reward players for bringing different styles of armies. They do have a best general, which is obvious, but then they also have Force Org awards. So if you're an orc player, you're also in the orc group, so you could win best orc general. You can win best Space Marine General. You can win, there's 9 or 10 different categories that they had, which is nice.
Moving back to Ohio from the West Coast, the West Coast, a lot of the West Coast tournaments are run through the ITC stuff, and they make sure that they do a lot of that as well. And, casual players kind of get a bad view of tournament players because of some of the internet tough guy fights, and then you go out and you actually play in a tournament, and like you said, you run into this chaos guy who may be running the hardest list possible, and it's a dude that you'd want to sit down and have a few beers with and talk about 40K forever because it's a great list and he's a good guy.
Actually, yeah, and that actually that's a good point because having said that, I went to Michigan a couple of years ago. Funny story, best game of 40K I've ever played in my life. I don't remember playing. Because the night before I went out and got super drunk. And I was so drunk. Two things happened. My buddy told me that, one, when I walked into the room to fall asleep on the floor, that I didn't lay on the floor. The only thing I did was I kicked my legs out from behind me and just fell to the floor really hard.
Seems legit.
Yeah, and he just came over, made sure I was alive, and I was, and then just let me go. But I was still drunk when I woke up the next morning.
Ooh, that's a good night.
I can't tell you the story because the story is weird. But I woke up drunk the next morning. Don't remember playing my first game of 40K that day. But my buddies told me that apparently I was the most on they've ever seen me playing 40K. I was running Ravenwing bike squads at the time because they were just come out with them in 7th edition, and they were hot because they were doing the 3-up rerollable Jinx save, which was huge. So I played some poor IG player at the time because of course IG at the time wasn't very good.
Yeah,
and I just rolled through the kid, and they said. They said at one point they had to calm me down because apparently I would kill some model and I'd just grab it and hand it to the kid and said, "This is dead." And I didn't mean to, but they explained to the kid, and he was really nice about it too. They explained to him I was just super drunk, but I played the best game of 40K ever there. But having said that, at that very same tournament, I met a really great guy by the name of Zach Bowles. He's from the Cincinnati area. And Zach, he's a competitive 40K player, really good. Zach introduced me at the time to a guy by the name of Severin Loth. And also, Severin Loth was harsh.
Yeah.
Because they had just put out Grab Centurions. So Grab Centurions were hot.
Yep.
And he ran a TCAT. He was running that year. So this is what he ran. He ran a Iron Priests with their Cyberwolves, because that was big. Ran a Librarian's Conclave to invis all the...
everything, yeah.
That whole blob. But then he ran in a drop pod, Severin Loth, with 3 Grab Centurions. So and the reason why that's nasty is Severin Loth comes down in the drop pod, casts invis on him and the 2 Centurions standing right, or 3 Centurions standing right next to him. Then before he does that, he spends a point to make himself have a 2+ invulnerable save.
Yep.
And that makes the invisible. And he beat the crap out of me. Great guy. Still one of my favorite people to play. And but yeah, you meet guys like that. They're huge.
Yeah, my experience was John Furhelm. I don't know if you've run into him in tournaments. He usually has an extremely well done army. He's an electrical engineer and works with Powered Play Gaming. Yep. So all of his stuff is LED'd out to the max. He's got, and he played, this was tail end of 6th, and he played the White Scars Biker Army.
Yeah.
And all the way that his bikes were identified was their headlights were different LED colors. And we ended up at the lunch break going out to lunch with the Powered Play Gaming guys. They took us to lunch. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I still talk to him 4 years later. He actually had the Guillemot that we've got on our site that's all lit up. That is just so beautiful.
So, yeah,
Robo. Gotta love Robbie G, man. He holds it down, or hate him in my case. But
yeah, so, he can die.
Yeah, all the time, forever and ever, amen.
Yep.
Well,
F him.
Doozer, I gotta say, man, thank you so much for coming out.
Hey, no problem.
And thanks for giving us a little insight into the tournament scene and your side of 40K, man. We love the deeper cut.
Yeah, no problem. And anytime any of the TCD guys want to get their butts kicked, let me know.
All right, dude. Thanks, and have a great night. It's on the table. TCDG's already given him the evil eye with his Grey Knight spam list to see who can be the true Great Smite Hope. We'll have to see how that breaks down, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back soon with some more great deeper cuts. And we're signing off from Immortals Inc. Studio. This is the Chainsword Diaries.